Life's better when you're empty inside.
Thank you so much for coming on, both of you.
Thank you.
Let's start where we all start, childhood. When did you start? Like when did you start out in the business? Did you have any interest? Was it your parents who put you in it?
Yeah, I was I was a person who was in school plays and liked it and didn't find that I was intimidated by the audition process. So honestly, that made me think like, oh, this is something I should do because I hear kids do this. My dad was a drama teacher. He was not my drama teacher. And my parents were documentary filmmakers before they had kids. So they had a pretty, my dad in particular had a very cynical view of the industry, didn't think it was a place for kids. And, I was very interested in the plays that he put on, and he was a really, really great director. And, many kids would skip all their classes, but go to Mr. B's, drama class. And he was a very dynamic and progressive kind of teacher. So I grew up with cameras around the house because my parents, were documentary filmmakers, and like we had a video camera when it was like the size of a house. So I was kind of comfortable in front of cameras. Also, I was raised in a traditional Jewish home, and there's definitely a presentational aspect, the way that we learn to chant the Torah, there's song and there's kind of a presentation element to a lot of our holidays. So I kind of had that comfort, but I wasn't like a hammy kid. I was not, I was a funny looking kid. I'm kind of a funny looking adult. So it wasn't like, oh, slam dunk, this kid's going to have success, because when I got into acting, there was what was called the all-American look. I'm sure you remember that term being thrown around.
Yeah.
And I definitely was not it. So I kind of knew it was a long shot, but I was a very good mimic. My parents, they said I looked like Bette Midler and Barbara Streisand, and literally typed a letter on a typewriter to different kids' agents. They used the Yellow Pages to find different kids' agents. Like there was no internet, there was nothing like that.
Yeah.
And they sent a letter about me and a picture that they like took in the backyard. And they said like, this kid wants to be in the industry. And I got an agent literally based on that letter and a meeting. And she ended up, I was 11 and a half. So I was entering middle school. So I already had like a lot of, kind of normal crazy life. And the agent that I ended up going with, her name was Bo Shute. And she was Johnny Galecki's agent. She was Neil Patrick Harris's agent. She was Stephen Dorff's agent, Mario Lopez. She just had this really specific eye for kids and unusual kids. So yeah, that's where I kind of settled. And I didn't have luck in commercials because I didn't look all American. I had blonde hair and blue eyes, but I didn't have small features. And that's really what was kind of popular then. And so I started getting cast in character roles, which is the name for roles that are given if you don't look like a leading lady, as it were, even at 11. So I did like 8 episodes of Webster, playing, kind of an Amy Farrah Fowler character, honestly, like a lot like the character I played on Big Bang Theory. I did some episodes of Facts of Life, and I was in the pilot for a spinoff of Facts of Life.
Facts of Life was so good.
But it was like a million years ago, like a million years ago. And like I was in that with Seth Green and Juliette Lewis. Like we were kind of this group of, kids, as it were. And then I was cast in Beaches when I was 12. It came out when I was 13. I played the young Bette Midler. And then I did a series that didn't go well at all, but Jennifer Aniston played my sister, which is why I mention it. It was called Malloy. It was, did not succeed. And after that, I did Blossom from the time I was 14 to 19. And that was a primetime NBC family show. We premiered after The Cosby Show. That's how old I am. And then we were on after Fresh Prince of Bel-Air for the most of our run.
Wow. What was the audition process like for that at 14?
So I didn't really audition for Blossom because, after Beaches came out, I got a bunch of different scripts and stuff.
Sure.
Very strange. I mean, I didn't grow up with money. Like I lived in just like a rental in Hollywood with my parents. Like I didn't have a fancy life. And so to be in this position was very strange. And I ended up meeting with Don Rio, who created Blossom. And originally he wrote the show about a boy. He wanted to do kind of a modern day Catcher in the Rye, but with a girl. And pretty much wrote it around me once we met. I did have to test at NBC, and testing is a process by which you go in front of like all the network executives. And I remember I was wearing my favorite Banana Republic suede vest. Hideous outfit. I mean, just so hideous the way I dressed back then. But anyway, I do remember walking into a very crowded room, and, at this time there were no network shows about a girl. So there was a tremendous amount of pressure and skepticism about if this would even work. And I remember, I read a couple scenes and then, like I woke up 5 years later and I was 19.
My God. Was the experience of the show overall a positive one for you?
Yes, it was yes. That's
awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, while I struggled a lot kind of interpersonally and felt very conflicted, as I think you can understand, about sort of being this like perky, like, every girl. And like, people would frequently say like, why aren't you smiling? When they would meet me in public, which is also just like something that I think we're realizing you shouldn't ask women. Like, we're not required to make you happy all the time. I remember feeling a lot of conflict over being recognized. And that was very strange to me.
Really? Please elaborate.
Yeah, I felt really weird. Like it's kind of like I would try and forget that I was famous. And then people would constantly remind me that I wasn't. And people were generally nice. And I think even, Jonathon can speak to that in the time that we, have spent, not during COVID. People are generally very nice to me. Like no one, once in a while you get someone who's like, I hate you, but my grandmother loves you. I just like reply like, yeah, I do really well with the grandmother scene. But no, most people are really nice. It's just when you're a person who doesn't think of yourself or doesn't want to think of yourself primarily as the object of someone else's, attention, it can be very jolting. And especially if you try and, like have a date with someone and be out or, be with your family or have a bad day, have parents who sometimes fight in public. Like all of these things become difficult when you're in the public eye. And it's even more extreme now because people have cameras and everything you do, everything you look like is recorded and posted all over the internet. And much as I'd love to be the kind of person who's like, I don't care what you think, I'm not that kind of person. And I don't think I ever will be. Like I always really, really care. And like if there's a million positive comments, but that one person who's like, you're a horrible person, I will go to bed thinking I'm a horrible.
You don't read the comments.
That's why I don't read comments. That's right.
Remember when you tried to click on the down?
I tried. No, what was it?
When the podcast first started.
When our podcast first started.
Looking at it was just the first couple episodes that were released, and mine was like looking. She's like, "Oh, look at all these thumbs up," and there were like 9 thumbs down. She was like, "But these 9 people, why didn't they like it?" And she thought that if you clicked on the dislike button, you would see.
I thought I'd see who were these 9 people, but instead I disliked my own video. And I never found out what those 9 people said.
God, whoever like thumbs downs YouTube video, who are these people?
I don't know. Here's the thing, like I could see people thumbs downing if it was like, you're asking a question, right? Like I'm at like, do you like cats or dogs? And I do a video saying I like cats. Like, and people might be like, no. But for me and Jonathon to start a mental health podcast, to put it out there and for people to be like, no, like, okay.
I just disagree with the entire.
I disagree with the distance that you walk. No, but being recognized, I think, especially when you're, coming into your own as a teenager and having to do so much of your life publicly and for other people, it's kind of like it sometimes feels like there's nowhere to go, and it's very hard to talk about this. I mean, obviously, I feel very comfortable talking to you about it. But most people, it's like, well, that's what you get. Like you're famous. What did you expect?
Ask for it? Yeah,
you asked for it, and also, not that I actively tried to extricate myself from my job, but there were many times, really, for my own personal reasons, that I was like, I don't know if I still want to do this. But I was contracted. Like it's actually like a thing. Like I actually wanted to go to college when all of my peers did, and I was accepted to Harvard, and that was the plan, that I was supposed to go back east. But I was not allowed to, you can't break a contract to do that because you're ready to go to college. Like that's just like, them's the breaks in our industry. So, it's not like, oh, poor me, I had to go through 2 years of making money and being on television. But, everyone's allowed to have a human experience, and it's not an exception, just because you're on television. And also I was kind of a dark, moody teenager, and that felt hard to have to constantly be for other people what they wanted me to be. But the reason that I say it was a positive experience is that I worked on a clean set. I never saw drugs or alcohol. I was surrounded by very creative people. My castmates were fun. I had other teenagers to hang out with who were cool. I mean, like, you know, we didn't need to be best friends, but like we had each other. And like, that was like, you know, Jenna, who played Six, like we took tap dancing for years together, like on set, like, you know, we did things together. And, you know, Don Rio, I call him my third parent. Like he wrote for me for 5 years, you know, he wanted me to have a positive experience. And, it's funny because my brother once mentioned, like, you were always complaining. And it's like, I remember complaining about a lot of things because I was a teenager, you know, but I kind of have like separated that memory of being like, I didn't want to act anymore because the fact is I was contracted. Like it's and I don't think people get that. Like, it's your job.
Were you able to lean on your family at all during that time? Were they sort of a source of comfort during the ups and downs or not so much?
No, I mean, yes and no. My dad, you know, was kind of he was a tough love kind of like, well, this is what you wanted, you know, like, what are you complaining about? Like, you make more money than most. Like, it's like, oh, that's not terribly helpful. And, you know, my mom kind of had to fill in the blanks. Any happiness I didn't have, like she just filled it in, or like any perkiness that I wasn't meeting the bar for, I feel like she filled that in. Like, and we were this like team, like we went everywhere together. And, you know, she was, I mean, I don't want to say that she was my best friend because I definitely didn't have that kind of feeling. And it's not something I really wanted, but she was kind of the closest person to me. Like she was with me all the time, you know, for better or for worse. And of course there are times as a teenager when like, you don't want your mom around, but we were kind of stuck together. And many kids got emancipated. I'm sure you knew kids who at 14 and 15 were like literally just with a random guardian who would drive them to and from work. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that definitely was not like my situation. It was like, I will watch everything you do, Mayim, and like, have a good day.
Your
Bill kind of does that. Yeah.
Sure. Well, your relationship to acting did you have those times where you contemplated leaving or just had a more up and down relationship with it later on? Or was this more just during that?
Oh no, I like my plan was to get out as soon as that contract was over. Like I knew that. I knew I wanted out. I wanted to be around academic people. I wanted to go to college. Like my grandparents were immigrants to this country. And much as I loved being on television, I was like, they didn't survive the Holocaust so that I could walk a red carpet. Like that's not the end all be all of my life. So I really wanted to go to college. I wanted to, you know, have people judge me more for what was inside of my brain and not just sort of what I could provide for them. You know, I mean, you get it. Like you're a Kleenex, like you're a nice Kleenex, but you are used up until you're of no use anymore. And then you're kind of like released into the world. Like, okay, like, thanks for everything you gave us. And, you know, I like to point out that, you know, girls at that time, as leading ladies at that time who were teenagers, like I wasn't set for life. You know, I'm not set for life because of like the work that I did in the early 90s. It was not that people didn't make that kind of money. I think at the time, Ted Danson made $100,000 a week. And I remember when that news came out, people were like, that's highway robbery. Like someone should arrest him. Like it was so crazy. And meanwhile, like, you know, the inflation in our industry it's so different, but people assume that like I made billions of dollars and like, no, that's, you know, there were laws that protected a certain amount of my, you know, my earnings. And those are the Jackie Coogan laws that are very important for child labor. But, you know, things get really messy and blurry. And so I still had to work. I still had to have a life. I still had to, you know, figure out how to budget and, you know, I was in grad school and how to get married and do all those grown-up things.
When did you first go to UCLA then? Was it right after rap?
Right after Blossom. Yeah. I literally walked like off of your television into, you know, the quad of UCLA, which is a large public university. It's a very fine research university. And, you know, dudes across the quad in particular would like scream at me. And if I rarely went to parties, but when I did, you know, drunk people will say the darndest things to you if you've been on television recently. So I eventually started dating the person that I, you know, ended up marrying and having kids with. And he had a really good group of guy friends who would kind of like, you know, stay close to me if we went places and, you know, get me out of places if we needed to. Yeah.
I was fascinated when I was like huge Big Bang Theory right at the time as you were joining the cast, like huge into the show, obsessed. And when you joined, I was fascinated by the fact that you went to college to study neuroscience and then went back to acting. That, I mean, blew my mind. I must have told everybody I knew and then their friend, like, can you believe this? Like, she did this and now she's coming back to acting. Like, what is going on? Like, what's happening?
What's going on is the American healthcare system, and I was running out of insurance. I had been teaching neuroscience for about 5 years. I designed a neuroscience curriculum after I got my doctorate.
Wow.
I had a nursing infant and a toddler. I would often teach with a baby strapped to my chest. Like, I was living a completely out of the industry life. I didn't even know what size clothing I was because I just wore like whatever was around.
Amazing.
My hair was like down to my butt. Like, I had long hippie chick hair. Like, I was living my best non-public life and was running out of insurance and literally felt like, I've never done this as an adult, really. I did a couple episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but literally someone started representing me when I was 8 months pregnant with my second kid. And by the time he was, 9 months or a year, we would the whole family would go to auditions and I would nurse him and then go on the audition and come back out. And I literally did like an episode of Bones. I did an episode of Saving Grace. I had never even tweezed my eyebrows. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I did What Not to Wear and they were like, you've never tweezed your eyebrows. We need to fix this. They cut off, a healthy 7 inches of my hair. And like, I had like this like public makeover, which is not awkward at all. And, really that's when I sort of started auditioning more. And I started at I don't want to say the bottom, but like every casting director either was too young to know who I was, or if they knew who I was like, who's this girl? Really? She's back again, So I auditioned for everything. I auditioned for like Zoftig Friend, #1, like characters with no name. But what it would say was like, submit all ethnicities is what they used to say, which meant like, she's not the pretty girl. Like, she's not horribly ugly, but like anywhere in the middle and also chubby. Like, that was... So at a whopping size 6, I was the chubby friend at every audition.
And had your relationship to acting at this point changed? Because it sounds like it was a completely different responsibility level.
I don't know if I knew how to do it anymore. I mean, like when you have someone writing for you for 5 years and you're 14 to 19, like, I don't know. Like my parents, like my mom would be like, you're a really good actress. I have no idea. Like, I didn't know. So I would just like go in and be myself and try not to rush because I'm a fast speaker. I'm not a confident auditioner at all. I'm a terrible auditioner.
Really?
Horrible. Like, terrible.
Do you like, are you off book, as they say? Or are you?
No. And what I decided, not at all because I'm like, I shouldn't have to be off book. It was so cripplingly scary to have to be off book that I decided I'm going to give the best audition I can without the pressure of being off book. Because if they don't believe that I can memorize things after being on a television show for 5 years, we all have bigger problems. Like, if they're like, wow, she's really good, but can she memorize those 2 sentences? Then I think it's okay to not give me the job.
Auditioning is hard. It's just such a specific skill. It's so different from what you do on the day. Also, it's
that's the thing. It's the thing. And I know you can't say like, hire me, I'll show you, I'll be great. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So, what other realm of life would you be like, I'm terrible on a first date, but if you marry me, everything's going to be great.
It'll all go away. It'll be daisies and roses.
Like, yeah, everything's going to be fine. So yeah. And then I had never seen The Big Bang Theory. I thought it was a game show. And I went and auditioned because I was told they wanted a female Jim Parsons. I had no idea who Jim Parsons was. I think he had just won like his 2nd Golden Globe. Like, he was a very big deal.
Yeah.
Kids, I was like out of the industry. I mean, yeah. I didn't know who Jim Parsons was.
And so you auditioned like not really knowing.
I Googled Jim Parsons, like playing Sheldon. Yeah. And I watched, I don't know, like 10 seconds. And I was like, oh, I know this guy. Cause like I went to grad school for neuroscience. Like, I know all these people. Like, I think I'm that person. So I just literally like, I didn't throw a diagnosis on it, but I actually auditioned without making eye contact. I had my character make no eye contact, which is
that sounds phenomenal.
Yeah. But also supposedly it was a good sign. We actually filmed it both ways. My part was very small when I auditioned.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a good sign that they ended up going with the takes where I did make eye contact, because then I was like, maybe if they bring me back, they're like, how weird to have a character never make eye contact. So I thought it was a good sign. And then they brought me back for a couple more episodes in season 4 and then made me a regular the week that I thought I was never going to be called back, because that's how my instinct works.
Why did you was there some specific?
Because I didn't like myself and thought that they were done with me. I mean, literally, I called my manager and I was like, I think this is my last episode. I don't think they're interested in me anymore. I feel like the character's done all she can do. And she was like, oh, you never know. And then a couple hours later, she called and she's like, well, how's this? They just offered you a regular position.
That's insane.
It was.
That's wild.
And I never trusted myself again.
And then you did it for 9 years, is it? What was that like? What was that like arc like for you? Was it love the entire time?
Yeah.
Like, it seems like an amazing, cast and everything. Was it like
amazing? It was super amazing. And also imagine entering high school 2 weeks into the last semester of everyone else's senior year. Like, it's like everyone knows each other. It's a finely oiled machine. And then like here you come in like, hey guys, I've never seen this show before, which I didn't say, but it came out very quickly that I had no idea Sheldon had a spot. Like, you can't sit in Sheldon's spot. So the first time we were blocking a scene in the living room, I was like, I guess I'll sit here for this scene. And the director was like, no, that's Sheldon. So I was like, of course, right. What am I thinking? Like, I had no idea. I didn't know Raj couldn't speak to women unless he was drunk, which is like a thing for like, I'm like, why is he can't talk? Why do people have to talk for him? I had zero idea what was happening. But I was
you did a lot of research.
I did a lot of research. You know me, I'm big on research. No, but Melissa Rausch, who played Bernadette, we were added at the same time. And that was wonderful.
Oh, that's so nice.
So nice.
Buddy.
Yeah. She was my buddy. And like, we were very close. We remained very close. And like, she would fill me in on things. I'm just like, there's a part missing of my Hollywood brain. Like, I don't have that part that like understands everyone's relationships and like who's connected. Like, I don't.
Thank you.
I don't know how to do that.
Thank you.
Everyone else had to tell me like, if you don't want so-and-so to know something, don't tell it to them. I'm like, okay, how about I talk to no one and then I can't offend anyone?
Yes, I swear to God, that is the hardest part of the industry. Some people have that skill of just knowing how to like be in the biz. I don't know it. I don't get it. I wish I did. It makes me feel so stupid anytime I'm around. I'm like, I have to just avoid groups with all the people who are also in the business because I don't know how to navigate.
There's also a huge, there's not another word than gossip, but I don't mean it to sound like everyone gossips, but the notion of information being passed around in our industry and in many industries, but a lot in our industry.
Yes.
That's like a skill. And I really, I grew up with a lot of gossip and I don't like it.
Yes.
And as I took on more religious observance, like that became a huge part of sort of like my soul doesn't feel good when I hear other people talking a certain way and when there's like triangulation and it's like something that's really hard for me. And it's something I really still try to break myself of, but the industry is like so much about, well, this one said that, so make sure you deal with this. And I'm just not good at that. I'm not skilled that way. So the cast was very welcoming. Like that's not just lip service of being like, hey, so welcoming. Right. But everyone has a different personality, and I definitely I felt very close to Jim because we had so many scenes together. Like the Amy and Sheldon stuff was so much of my thing. Johnny Galecki and I had known each other since we were teenagers. He was on Blossom actually, in our first season. Wow. He and I had known each other. He became much cooler than I ever could be though. So we weren't it's not like we were hanging out and like super buddies. But we had different relationships with everyone. But Melissa, because we came in at the same time, we kind of had the same, grounding or lack thereof.
Absolutely. And what was your relationship with neuroscience now? Were you like, oh, I completely left that behind? Or were you like, well, I kind of get this show's kind of adjacent?
I actually left academia really before I decided to go back to acting because I had my first son in grad school.
Yeah.
And I got pregnant with my second son the week I filed my thesis. So I kind of knew already that I wanted to dedicate the first years of my kid's life to being home with them. So I kind of had already left neuroscience in terms of if you're not going to conferences and you're not doing a postdoc and you're not like putting your kids right in daycare, like you're already kind of out of it. And that's, you know, a decision that yes, men have to contemplate, but it's very different for women. Especially because, you know, I was the primary caregiver. I was, you know, an exclusive breastfeeder. And while, yes, you can pump, I chose to physically be with my child to avoid the middle woman, as it were, of the pump. So I was physically, you know, like there with my kids for those years of their life. And that kind of already removed me from the industry, meaning the science industry.
Right.
So I did. I went on to, you know, I taught and I taught junior high and high school. But yeah, it was kind of like, you know, it was one of those moments of like, okay, what happens next? And it's, you know, it's something Jonathan and I definitely talk about on the podcast too, like in terms of mental health, like how do you make decisions to just take a leap and not know? And most people assume like, well, you were financially set for life. And it's like, no, I wasn't financially set for life. I made a decision that was difficult and I didn't know. I mean, I pictured myself teaching, you know, I taught piano, I taught Hebrew, like I drove all around to make $25 an hour or $20 an hour, you know, to teach this one's kid or teach that. Like, you know, I was living a life of a grad student, living off a stipend. I taught, I TA'd as much as I could to help supplement, you know, my stipend. But I was living a life of a grad student. I don't want to say normal because for many people that's, you know, that had healthcare and all sorts of things. But yeah, I was living the life of a grad student at that point. And so leaving was very much like, I don't know what next. And I never expected to be a regular on a TV show. I already did that once in life. Like, I wasn't thinking like, better get on a show. Like, I had no idea what was going to happen. I was hoping to just get enough like guest spot work to get my insurance so that I could have insurance for my kids. Like, that was literally what I thought would happen. And then I'd keep teaching.
I struggle so much with uncertainty and with transition periods and going, what's happening? What am I doing next? Where am I going from here? And the uncertainty that comes with that it can be crippling. It's so difficult. And I think it is for many people. That little period is so fucking difficult. I can't imagine navigating that with children, with the level of responsibility that you had. Like, what did you have specific like tools that you leaned on? Do you look back on it? It was like, well, it was a miracle. I don't know what.
It's a miracle. I mean, like, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we became parents around the same time. And it's also like just having children and trying to be present with them is its own challenge. We also live in a culture that doesn't really support that. Like, you know, we're not given maternity, paternity leave. We're not given, you know, all of that kind of flexibility. So yeah, it was crazy. And I also I didn't have a nanny. I didn't have a housekeeper. I didn't have my parents weren't helping raise the kids. Like, we were just figuring it out. And, you know, also I was 27 when I got married. Like, I thought I had it all figured out. And then lo and behold, oh, you still keep developing and growing as a person. And then you're also responsible for these humans who really need you. Like, they'll die if you don't feed them. It's you know, it's more than a houseplant. It's like a human, you know? And it was a lot of madness. And I think a lot of people report that those years of parenting, especially if you're parenting kind of the way I did and the way many people do, it's you're always on call, you know? So I understand why people are stay-at-home parents, because it's a full-time deal. It really is. And, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. So it's not like I was sending them to classes. And it was just sitting and playing and taking walks.
The kiddos.
And get people to nap and then just fighting over food. And, you know, that's life.
Yeah. So, okay, let's fast forward if we can to kind of the ending of Big Bang Theory. And the inception of this podcast and the thereafter of Big Bang. Yeah. So when that show was done, what was that like for you?
It was over. I was like, that's it. I'm never going to work again. I'm done. No, I think
you're seeing a thread here.
Right. This is a very common theme. I mean, honestly, there was a tremendous amount of attention, most of it not accurate, about kind of the financial situation of our show, which I'm sure you can also relate to. Everyone being up in your financial business A, very bizarre, B, very intrusive, and C, very frustrating when it's not even accurate information. And then it's like, you can't be like, I don't make $3 million, I make $1 million. Like you can't, it's so ridiculous. And like, it's done. Those are made up numbers. Those are not real numbers. I just was like, anyway. But the notion, like the simplest way I like to put it is I was not in a position to never work again. So it was my responsibility as a homeowner, as a person who, provides insurance for my children and the people that work at my production company. Like I have to work. I'm still in the position in life where I have to work. Mm-hmm. So Jim Parsons, who played Sheldon, approached me about doing an American adaptation of a BBC show called Miranda, which is about a very unusual woman. And the way Jim said it to me is, if anyone can pull off annoying and adorable, I think it's you. I was like, well, most people find me annoying, but some people find me adorable. So that sounds great. So then this thing called COVID happened, like a global pandemic began, and the production of this show was put on hold. And that it was, frustrating, scary, depending on the day, terrifying and anxiety provoking. Our country was also in the middle of a tremendous amount of confusion about who to trust. And I think that's true whether you supported Trump or didn't. The information was coming like fast and furious. And one day it was like, do this. Another day it was like, don't do this. Like touch a metal surface with your tongue. Don't look at a metal surface or you're going to get COVID. And it was right around that time that Jonathon and I had started writing and kind of partnering in a lot of different ways. Yeah. And one of the things that we always kind of resonated on for the years we've known each other, I guess going on the decade we've known each other, was mental health. And my mental health definitely took a little dive during the pandemic, as did that of many people. And we came up with this kind of notion of like, in this time when you kind of can't do anything, is there something that we could do? And Jonathon is...
The podcast wasn't our first attempt at that.
The podcast was not our first attempt at that.
What was your first attempt?
We wrote a TV show.
We wrote a beautiful script. Okay. That we had the amazing opportunity. This was like during COVID. We were those people who wrote a pilot. Like, all the creatives who were like, I'm going to write a pilot. We were like, we wrote a pilot. And it was so beautiful. Yeah. And I have an overall deal at Warner Brothers and they were like, this is really beautiful. And we were like, we know. So we got to shop it. Like we had this Zoom experience of pitching a show. I mean, I guess we could say it was about 3 different kinds of couples during COVID who are all part of like a community, like 3 couples. Yeah. And all at different stages of their relationship. And it was very witty and we were very smart and we were very sharp tongued and we had a great time pitching it. And no one wanted a show about 3 couples in COVID. So we started talking about like, what are other creative things that we can do? And Jonathon has much more of like a tech business futurist kind of perspective. And so he was especially interested in the kind of information that people get. So what we did is we paired his, knowledge, my skepticism, and we decided, let's do this thing that people have always been like, you should do a podcast. And I was like, I don't want to. But with Jonathon by my side, I knew that it could be a very targeted thing. Sure. I had a partner to start building this notion of what does it look like to think about mental health and mental wellness in ways that people don't usually talk about? Because I've read all the articles, I've read the self-help books, I've listened to Gwyneth Paltrow, and to me, there's a lot about that kind of celebrity approach that is not accessible to me. I don't get it. So what we kind of wanted to do was what's our version of it? How about there's a full spectrum of ways that we think about mental health and also a lot of holistic things that many people used to be like, that's crazy. And lo and behold, there's a science to acupuncture. There's a science to meditation. So we kind of just started saying, who can we get to come talk about mental health? And 18 episodes later, here we are.
How many episodes later?
We've done 18. Well, we've had 18 air.
Yeah, we've released that.
We've released 18.
And what has the process of having a podcast been like for you guys? Has it been more daunting than you expected, easier than you expected? Has it been as fulfilling as you hoped? Has it been completely unfulfilling and you're like, I need a new thing?
No, it's been, for me, my first kind of foray into this arena is, obviously a million years ago. I had Facebook, and I was like, oh, you can post things, or like you can tell people about things, or like, oh, especially when I was, a mom and my kids were young, I'd be like, oh, I really think people should know about this. Not that like, I think you should do this with your life, but like,
Sure.
Did you know that, for example, plastics produce terrible chemicals? And people were like, do you want us to throw away all our toys? And I was like, yes. And they were like, you're crazy. And then years later, everybody's like, throw away all the plastic because
There's
it's terrible.
Been recently all this stuff about endocrine disruptors and the fact that sperm counts have plummeted. And
sperm counts have plummeted. So I used Facebook. I will get around this, but I used to use Facebook as kind of like a way to like tell people things that I thought they might want to know. And I had a really nice little community. And okay, so then it becomes Twitter, and then it becomes Instagram. And then a lot of places are like, well, we won't hire you, or we won't give you this deal unless you have X number of followers. So then it was like, okay, now I have a job, get 1 million followers on Instagram.
Right.
Like, okay, so now it's my job. And like, I'm not really like a post pictures of myself in a bikini kind of person, but I do know that people who do have a lot more followers, but I didn't do that. So I just like the little engine that could, like, here's me and my cat, and like, this is what I look like when I wake up in the morning. Not that different from what I look like now. Anyway, I then started into YouTube space because I was like, people seem to want to hear what I have to say. I think I'm annoying, but I'm going to talk and see what happens. And that was my business partner at the time, Emmanuel Shalev. He was like, there are people like you. They're out there. And I'm going to show you that they exist. You're going to be yourself. You're going to be your authentic, weird, adorable self and see what happens. And indeed, he was right. We now have 1 million subscribers, and most people want to hear me talk about deep things for a long period of time, about open relationships, about science and religion, about veganism, like about what it's like to be divorced, like all these things. So to move into podcast space is like, how about instead of me talking for 5 minutes, I talk for 85 minutes?
Just bump it up. Yeah.
Just like, let's keep, next thing I'll just be filibustering in your living room is what I'm going to do next. And, I've always been, supported and moved ahead in my life by people who believed in me more than I believe in myself. And Jonathon is that person where he was like, people want to talk to you. People want to hear what you have to say, and you have an interesting perspective. And then he added the kind of spice of like, people also want to hear what I have to say, Mayim. And so now we have 2 desks in one room, and we're this kind of team. And, it's really like, that's a whole experience in and of itself, because I was actually talking about this. I was like, Jonathon's not a public person, but we're giving him the kind of attention that you and I were raised to handle, right? So I'm very protective of him. I'm very worried.
I get very little attention.
That's not true. That's not true. You get a lot of attention, and people ask a lot of questions about you. And, we are co-pilots together. And so that's been really interesting. But it's a very vulnerable thing to put yourself out there without a script. And when we started, I would write kind of some sciencey script intros. And now we're a little bit more off the cuff. We're kind of falling into more of a rhythm of our sense of humor. There are some episodes where we're not speaking off camera, because it's hard. It's very hard. And it's, he has a brain for things that I don't. And I hope that I have a brain for things that he doesn't.
A lot.
But, I sometimes envy people who don't have a co-pilot because then you kind of you just like, you do your thing and people are like, you're doing great. Whereas like, I've got this guy who's like, slow down. Like, why are you picking your nails? Like hold your lovey so that you don't like make your nails bleed on camera.
And most of the time after each interview, I say, they didn't have such a bad time.
That's our goal. Well, like with you, we were like, who knows if I'm going to upset her? She might hate us, but it was good.
I feel like if we can make the guests laugh a few times.
We like to make the guests laugh. We like to make each other laugh. And honestly, almost every single episode we've done. I mean, I don't want to say almost every single. I would say at least half the episodes, people have said, I've never shared this before. I'm going to share it right now, including like discussions of like suicide attempts, like really heavy things. And people want to talk to this face.
I think that we can address very deep things. And I think both Mayim and I tend towards that like deeper philosophical.
Yeah, we're not light.
We want to see like that. Like, I believe everyone has a sort of a core pattern or organizing principle. And a lot of people don't know what that is.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you expand on that?
Well,
yeah,
explain.
So organizing principles, it's a term in kind of psychotherapy. And what it is, there are, the science perspective is that there are grooves in the firing of your neurons that will repeatedly fire. And meaning when you have an experience, you will try and make that experience fit whatever your organizing principles are.
Mm-hmm.
So, God forbid, if people come from abuse and the message that they got is, I'm unlovable unless I'm of service to someone else. Every experience they have, they will try and fit it into, it will reinforce.
Yep.
And, and a lot of people would say like, well, that doesn't seem very evolutionarily advantageous. Like, wouldn't you want to say like, oh, this person's trying to give me love, but it's the reason that many of us get into unhealthy relationship patterns. It's the reason that we can't get out of addictions or that we stay in a dark, secret place, or we have, things that we hide. We're as sick as our secrets. So what Jonathan's perspective is like, everyone's got their organizing principles and some of them are good, but usually when we talk about them in a therapeutic sense, it's like, I'm unlovable. I'm unattractive.
Not enough.
I'm not enough, right? Whatever those kind of organizing
people
principles
are out to get me. Their world.
People are going to take advantage of me, right? So,
oh my God, that's one of mine.
Well,
there you go.
and Jonathan really likes to like get right in it and like make someone like figure it out. And I have to remind him, like, we're not licensed therapists. I've been to enough. He thinks he is. I've been to enough therapy that I feel like a licensed therapist some days. Sure. But the notion is that that's what we're trying to, we're not doing like a, hey, how was your day? And like, tell me about your favorite memory. Like, we're like, what were you raised like? How was it terrible? And how did you fix it?
Yes.
We're pattern making machines. We just don't know what the patterns are.
Right.
And we're all caught in these cycles. And more than can we talk about our anxiety and depression, if we get into the specifics, and especially through story, what ends up happening is that we make these links through the conversations.
Right.
And when I say we, I mean just human beings, not necessarily on the podcast. And so if the podcast can do that at all and show people that there are links to be found, I think that's a massive benefit, just so that people can know that it exists, because we're all struggling. And yet there are links and revelations that we can all uncover.
And also, I don't mean to make it sound like we're like a public service announcement for your mental health, but
no, it's just fun too.
Well, okay, but it's fun, but also, yes. And I think Jonathan and I both believe that like mental health, it's a human right to have information about your mental health. And I can't tell you the number of educated people that I spoke to during pandemic who were like, why am I waking up in the middle of the night feeling like there's a gun to my head? Why am I not sleeping? It's like, you're anxious because there's a pandemic and the president sometimes tweets from the toilet. Like, that's why you're confused. But just the fact that like even well-educated people, didn't even know the difference between an anxiety attack and a panic attack. Like, if I hear one more person who's having an anxiety attack be like, I'm having a panic attack. If you're having a panic attack, I'll tell you that's not it. But that's also what we do as a public service. Like, I define things like, what's the difference between manic depression and regular depression? Can you be manic and depressed, but not bipolar? What is OCD really? Is it just that you like to line your shoes up? No. What happens if you don't line your shoes up is more what OCD is about.
While she's explaining all this stuff, we're also cracking jokes, and we're not taking ourselves all that seriously.
No.
And we're also just listening to people who have really interesting stories.
Yeah.
And in that, to me, is not about mental health. It's just about the existence of being physical, having emotions, and trying to understand ourselves better.
I love your guys' podcast so much. I hope everybody who hasn't checked it out does check it out. I feel like it's of great service to people. It makes difficult, hairy subject matter approachable. And it's so troublesome to me that so many people don't have access to the proper mental health care that they deserve. It's just out of reach for so many people to see a therapist, even something as simple as that. And I think that you guys are helping in such a big way. And I think it's so important. I'm so glad that you are both doing it.
Thank you.
One thing, very easy thing that people can do without mental health care.
Yes.
Is like, ask themselves, how did that experience feel to them? And like, what was the impact of it? Because so often we're just trained to be like totally disconnected from our emotional experience.
Shove it under the rug.
Our physical experience. And so people are waking up in panic or not panic attacks. They're waking up with panic or feelings of intense, like massive, intense feelings. But we don't make any room in our lives to process.
No, we're told to have a drink, go hook up with someone online.
Retail therapy.
People can do, but like we're encouraged to like have a cigarette or like, smoke some weed or like eat, or don't eat, just like fill that hole instead of like, something that a lot of us don't want to take the time to do. And here's my thing. You can't force people to get well. You can't force people to get help. But what you can do is say, you'll do exactly what you do until you don't do it anymore. And when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, you
just make a little room for it. Make a little room for it.
Correct.
And like, it will be okay.
You mentioned this, like that hole, which is, I think we all are familiar with it, whether or not we admit that is one thing, but I think we all know it. What do you guys do? What do you find is the most effective, or are some of the most effective tools to filling that hole in a real way, in a not just temporary quick fix? I was going to say,
well, what's effective is feeding it. In my case, and that worked till it didn't. But
right before you get into the list, because you're going to have a wicked list.
I'm not making a list.
No, but you have really effective tools to answer that question.
Okay.
For me personally, what has been the most game changer is identifying that a feeling or drive that I'm having is being created by that hole. Because often our behavior is so learned and so conditioned and so automatic that it's like, I'm starving, I need this, I need that, I really need physical, whatever it is. But when I stop just long enough to be like, oh, wait a second, it's that endless hole of suffering that is rearing its head, and
the old endless hole of suffering.
And
presenting in a different way, then I have enough distance to be like, oh, can I have a different relationship with it? And then you can have endless tools to.
So the first tool I think, that Jonathan just said is feel your feelings. And many people don't even know what it is to sit in their feelings because emotions can't hit a moving target. That was my motto really for my whole life. Like if I just keep going, workaholism is one of the best ways to fill that hole in a not healthy way.
Yes.
But if I just like keep moving and I'm constantly busy and I just like finish emails at 11:30 and I go to bed and I wake up at 6 and I start it all over again, I'm just like, look at how many things I'm getting done. But it doesn't leave room for actually feeling things. So feeling your feelings means leaving time in your day to think, to take a walk, to do something without your phone constantly attached to you. The notion of like, I got so used to, even when I walk in my neighborhood, taking my phone and like catching up on texts and all this stuff. Like when you put it down, you realize like, oh, I have thoughts about things. Oh, I'm going to cry because I didn't process what happened. Like that's feeling your feelings. Meditation and breathing is no joke. It's not a joke. It's a real thing. Learning how to breathe properly. Most people literally breathe in their stomach. And that's actually not a complete breath. You don't get enough oxygen and it doesn't regulate your physiology the same way. It can mess up your digestion. I remember the first time it was a craniosacral healer who asked me to breathe into my shoulders. And I was like, what is she talking? I was so annoyed with her. She showed me how when you breathe from your diaphragm and you let that inhalation carry all the way up, you feel it literally, you feel your collarbone like open up. And I was like,
well, your thoracic cage, your
thoracic cage, he said.
The job of this whole upper body is to expand and contract.
I just like sat straighter doing it.
Right. And that's
like down here.
That's the mind body connection. Like that's your way in. If you're a person who gets an upset stomach when you're nervous, that's your body communicating that your mind is feeling things. And so those are just some of the things, but I use a free meditation app that's guided meditations. If I'm feeling lonely, I'd search lonely and you get like a million suggestions of like, here's a 5-minute meditation on loneliness. And I sit and I put my phone down and I just let it play and I close my eyes. Like I've learned the fine art of napping late in life because even if I don't sleep, it forces me to remember I'm a human being. I'm not a human doing. So you need to leave space in your day to simply be. You really want to say something.
I caught myself because a lot of people say, okay, meditation will help you. And what I caught myself doing is using meditation to bypass feeling my feelings because I was like, oh, I'm not feeling okay. I'm going to meditate and feel better.
Meditate out of it. Yeah.
Exactly. But the whole process is slowing down enough so that you're not in that hyper-vigilant state of doing and then allowing whatever happens in that slower state to, number one, be okay with it. Number 2, to know it's not going to wreck you. And number 3, to know like that's the process by which you like sort of start to repair and reset.
Also, like I cut out caffeine during COVID because that seemed like the right time to do that. First of all, my sleep completely shifted, but I realized in a good way, but I also realized like how much of that rush is what many of us function on, whether just like, look, I can keep going. And a friend of mine recently, when she found out I don't drink caffeine, she's like, that's why you're always napping. And at first I felt like guilty, that I'm not like being productive enough, or that I take 20 minutes.
But
and then
20 minute reset.
And then I realized like, everyone deserves to take a nap, like to have 20 minutes when they're not beholden. It's like, that's why siesta exists in many countries. Anyway, that's our story.
We are sadly almost out of time. Can I ask you a very few quick questions about directing? I'm like dying to know.
Yeah. So I wrote a screenplay.
Yes.
After my father died. It was kind of a cathartic process that I had never anticipated. And I've written books. Like I have 2, New York Times bestsellers about puberty for girls and for boys. Cause like, that's kind of what I'm trained to do. I've never written a screenplay. I've never written dialogue. And I wrote, it's not a memoir. I keep telling myself and my mother that, it's, it is a fictionalized version of a family, a lot like mine and a lot like many families where mental illness kind of ran rampant through a house and no one named it. And it was kind of just like, what's the fallout, and specifically what the sibling relationship was like. I have a brother 4 years older, and this screenplay explores that from the perspective of a woman who is divorced with 2 kids and trying to put her life together while also caring for her father as he is dying. And it's a really, there's a lot of funny in there. And I was like kind of waiting for them to like bring in a real writer to write it. Nope. Nobody else wants to write it. Definitely got help from this guy and others as well. But I started thinking about directors, and I was looking at, a lot of young directors who would be able to fit our very low budget indie, budget. And it was a lot of really talented people, but I couldn't imagine trying to describe to these people what it looked like. Cause I know what it looked like, cause I wrote it, cause I was there, and so I was elected to direct it, and here we are. And, I think many people said to me, if you were a guy, like right out of film school, you'd be like, yeah, I'm going to direct my first feature film with Dustin Hoffman and Candice Bergen. And so I'm trying to have that energy of like, yeah, I know it's unusual for women to direct, but we can do it too. And I've been in this industry since I'm 11 years old. And I've always been more interested with angles and shots, and script supervisors, like my favorite position, because I love continuity and I love timing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like totally makes sense to me. And I have a fantastic DP, and, having a director of photography who gets the vision that I have, because I have a specific way I want it to look. And I have, an actor who's won an Academy Award. So it's a very big deal. Also, Simon Helberg is in it from Big Bang Theory. He played Wallowitz, and Diana Agron is playing the lead. And so that's this family. It's a very, it's a small film about a very big thing. But, visually I'm inspired by a lot of the filmmakers that my dad made me watch as a kid. And I'm nervous, but I'm also very excited. And because I love that emotions can't hit a moving target, being a director is like, that's going to be my life. Like, it'll be a very discreet existence. You have to live and breathe that project. And I do really well like that. I do really well on a treadmill. So, yes. A treadmill. I don't do well on those at all. I'm always alcohol.
Has the process of this has it been a long process for you? Has it been?
We got interrupted by COVID. So yeah, we were supposed to go. Then I literally thought it was never going to happen. And once vaccines started becoming available, it is more doable. And so we have a really great team. We're filming in New Jersey, and you can film during COVID. You can pod, and that's what we're doing. And yeah, it's been exhausting. It's like every big decision, every little decision. I'm highly musically inclined, so also trying to select, music to tell this story. But yeah, it's like a million decisions. And I leave in a couple of weeks, so that's crazy.
Wow. Maybe this is a question that you don't know the answer to. You tell me yet, but is this what you see as a full career transition, or is this something that you're like, this is a passion project, we'll see down the line?
No, I mean, I would love to be able to tell stories. And I think, we talked about this a little bit. I really can't imagine telling someone else's story as a director. Like, I mean, it might happen, but this is such a specific project, like to write your own thing. I mean, specifically, and to share a bit of what's inside of your head in terms of how you grew up and what some of that pain was is a very particular thing. So I don't know what's next, but I do know that the aging process has started and the collagen is starting to disintegrate right here on my chin. So the sooner I can secure a life for myself that isn't relying on like, you sure you don't want a little shot there? Like my hair's pretty gray, but like I'm sticking with it. So like, I can't wait until I can live my best life in sweats all the time.
First off, you're so lucky that you have collagen to disintegrate in the chin. I just like don't have a chin. It's just not there.
Both of us. Funny how that works.
All right, you guys, this has been so fun. Where can people tune into your podcast, find you, both of you?
Mayim Breakdown. You can find it on Mayim's YouTube channel. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get podcasts.
Also, bialikbreakdown.com.
BIALIK
breakdown.com.
We always say that together. It's
yeah, that's kind of us. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. This has been so fulfilling.
Thank you. We no
so
longer
much.
feel empty inside. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Bye, guys.